Hello, my name's Sam. Welcome to my channel. So what I wanted to do today was try to predict my favorites for the end of the year. I saw Kayla from Books and Lala try to predict her subscribers' #1 best book of the year by seeing their 9 previous ones. So I thought it would be fun to try to predict my own favorites based on previous years. And if I'm looking down, it's because I'm looking at my laptop. So I'm gonna go year by year basically. So first I have 2020. I feel like it would be interesting to look back to on all the books that I read in that year and what that I read from that year actually is still a standout favorite from that year. And I feel like a lot of these probably wouldn't make that list. But anyways, what do we have from here? So we have 4 YA. I used to read a lot more YA and then it slowly dwindled. I have 3 books that are poetry / written in verse, 2 memoirs, 5 books that I'd say are kind of a uniquer format, whether that be because they're poetry or written in verse, or Eliza and Her Monsters has the comic book inserts in there, and In the Dream House is memoir style but written totally uniquely. More contemporary stuff. It wasn't until later years that I started to lean into weirder things, speculative or horror adjacent. The most unique book on this list I would say is In the Dream House. Okay, now 2021, we still have a little bit of YA. We have 3 YA, 1 book written in verse, 1 memoir, 3 books with kind of that unique format with muted. A Dowry of Blood is written as letters, and A History of My Brief Body, I can't really remember, but I think it was memoir style, but written a little bit different. So when I say unique format, maybe it has specific elements, some books that I love will have transcripts or interviews, or they're written in verse, or just not a straightforward narrative style, I would say. So we have 3 of those. First horror book on here with The Dowry of Blood. I think that's what started me on loving horror, and The Hollow Places as well. We're getting into more of sadder, melancholy tone, with Johnny Appleseed and Watch Over Me, getting into speculative. Nothing to See Here was my introduction to me loving those kind of slightly unlikable characters. They're kind of coasting through life, they're messy but also lazy. Characters that run into trouble but in kind of a go girl, give us nothing kind of way. Okay, 2022, leaning more into the sad melancholy tone. No YA. I mean, you could maybe consider Dragon Republic kind of YA. 1 unique format kind of book with Sea of Tranquility, not that straightforward narration style. There's so many different timelines going on. 3 memoirs, and all of them, the memoirs and stuff that I love tend to be ones that have those social commentary. 1 fun kind of quirky book. Actually, this one, Jamila Green Ruins Everything, definitely brought me into some satirical stuff for next year. So I read that one and loved the satirical nature of that. And then because of that book, I read a lot of things that ended up in my favorites of 2023, which were things like The Bandit Queens, Glory, Dial A for Aunties, kind of just those Glory and The Bandit Queens, similar to Jamila Green, have important topics and conversations in them, but they're told in kind of this humorous, satirical way. Dial A for Aunties are just a straight up comedy. 1 YA, no nonfiction, only 1 horror adjacent book with The Book of the Most Precious Substance. Nettle and Bone is fantasy, but it was fairy tale vibe, so still light and fun. This year we go back to a lighter tone. I had my sad girl moment in 2022, and now I'm feeling kind of sassy with all the satirical things. We have the types of characters I love back with Les, Early Morning Riser, Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone. So yeah, definitely a tone switch from 2022 to 2023. And then 2024, we kind of have a perfect mix of cozy, cutesy, horror, speculative, sadder tone, lighter tone. No YA, but randomly 1 middle grade with Everything Sad is Untrue. 2 romance on here. I haven't had any romance in my top 10 previously. Maybe something that had a side romance, but not a full contemporary romance. No nonfiction. 2 unique format books with horror movie that has transcripts, and then Shark Heart that is written in all vignettes. So yeah, definitely a perfect mix from previous years. Okay, so what are my takeaways? So gradually less YA, so there won't be any of that on this list. The things ending up in my top books tend to fit into like 3 or 4 main categories, like horror, horror adjacent, weird kind of like speculative things, some like cozy things, and then some like satirical contemporary with like kind of unlikable characters. With some outliers like the odd sci-fi or fantasy, less memoirs lately, but definitely at least like 2 or 3 books that have kind of like that different like narrative style. So the things that I want to make sure that I'm hitting with this list are, I want to have something that's horror, horror adjacent, something that's like contemporary with like unlikable characters, something that's a little bit weird and speculative, something cozy, maybe a romance, definitely 2 or 3 that have like a unique format or different writing style. And yeah, then we'll like fill in the gaps with some other things. Oh, and another thing that I wanted to consider was what books and that ended up in my top 10 came out like in that year and what was backlist. And I found that I had like 2 or 3 new releases from that year, but I had more. I had like 3 or 4 books that came out from the year previous. So I'll probably try to have like 2 or 3 new releases, but I feel like I'll have more from 2024 because those are what are like sticking in my mind. And I think what's going to impact this as well is the fact that I am like making more videos now, and so I probably will be reading more kind of newer things, like more things from 2024 and 2025, just with like the videos that I want to make. So I think there will be more on this list from 2024 than in previous years where I maybe only had 3 or 4 from the year previous, if that rambling makes any sense. So I'm just going to pop all the graphics on the screen along with my contenders, and then we'll just talk about the reasons why I'm pulling each book. Okay, so I'm going to start with cozy. Because of Nettle and Bone and The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, I'm going to put Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett and Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater in my contenders list. Same with Sword Heart by T. Kingfisher. I'm going to put that on this list because of those cozy things mentioned, and also because I've just previously loved T. Kingfisher. I definitely consider her one of my favorite authors. Loved Hollow Places, loved Nettle and Bone. All of her other books, except for one, I have given 5 stars. Speaking of The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, I'm going to put A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping by Sanku Mandana on here, because I think that takes place in the same like universe. I think it's like a companion novel to The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, and it has those cozy vibes, plus it is a 2025 release. And now speaking of 2025, I don't really know the vibes of Run for the Hills by Kevin Wilson, but I would still consider to this day Nothing to See Here my favorite book of all time. And I haven't read anything else by Kevin Wilson, which is a little silly, but because he has a new release coming out in 2025, I am gonna put Run for the Hills on this list. Okay, now for some like horror adjacent kind of things. Because of Slewfoot, horror movie, Hollow Places, all the other ones that I am now putting in this little different color here, I am going to put We Used to Live Here by Marcus Kleber. I am so excited to read this book, and I just can't imagine not enjoying it. This also ticks the box of having like a unique format, because I think there's a little bit of like mixed media in here. Sticking with horror adjacent, I'm also going to put The Haunting of Velkwood on here by Gwendolyn Keist, Private Rights by Julia Armfield, Monstrilio. I'm also going to pop The God of the Woods by Liz Moore on here. I don't think that this one is like horror adjacent, but I think it's like more slow burn mystery, kind of suspenseful. And because I loved These Silent Woods, and that was kind of like a slower kind of like mystery suspense, I think that one could like have similar potential. I'm going to put another 2025 release on here, and that is The Emperor of Gladness by Ocean Vuong. This one I feel like is going to have similar vibes to Johnny Appleseed and A History of My Brief Body, kind of like that sadder tone that I like, and also I have loved Ocean Vuong previously. Now for things that are like contemporary but with like unlikable kind of like coasting type of characters, I'm going to add The Wedding People, I Hope This Finds You Well, and Margot's Got Money Troubles. Another very specific comparison is I'm going to put Every Time I Go on Vacation Someone Dies by Catherine Mack on here, specifically because of Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone by Benjamin Stevenson. I think that Every Time I Go on Vacation has the same like direct to reader kind of like quirky mystery, breaking the fourth wall style, and so I think that one could be a potential. Now, because I had 2 romance on my 2024 favorites, I'm going to add Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez, specifically because I had an Abby Jimenez on my favorites of 2024, and I had like a romance with like a speculative element with the 7-year slip. So I think Just for the Summer being by Abby Jimenez and having like a magical kind of element could be a win. So I've hit kind of like the main ones with like cozy, horror, contemporary, but I haven't really hit that like weird kind of speculative. Like I have like the weird and speculative with like the horror, like horror adjacent books, but I don't have like what I'm looking for specifically is something like Nothing to See Here, something that has that speculative element with like the kids spontaneously combusting, but is still like in like a kind of contemporary universe. It's still like a lighter book. It's not like a heavier type of book with like a sadder tone. It still kind of has like a fun light tone. And I honestly am not really super happy with what I found. So that is one thing. If you can think of like a book like this that you think that has similar vibes to that you think I would love, please leave me a comment below, because the best that I could kind of come up with was Water Moon by Samantha Sato Yambeo. And this is about a woman who like has a pawn shop where you can sell your regrets. So it might lean more fantasy, but it also could be more of like a real world with a speculative element, but I won't really know until I read it. And then the other kind of like weird speculative, but this one I feel like it's probably more like sci-fi dystopian, but that is Annie Bot by Sierra Greer. And I think this could be one that just kind of comes out of left field and like totally surprises me. So all of these ones hit most of my key points, but I'm gonna add 2 more outliers. I'm gonna put a memoir on this list, and it's gonna be How to Say Babylon by Sophia Sinclair. And I think this one is gonna be similar to memoirs I've loved in the past that have like great social commentary. Another book that I loved, I think from 2023, even though it didn't make it to my top 10, was A Mind Spread Out on the Ground by Alicia Elliott. And I think that How to Say Babylon is going to have like a similar format where like they're talking about personal things and like personal anecdotes, but then also kind of taking more of like a deep dive into like societal issues. And I really love memoirs with that style. And the last outlier I'm going to mention is another book that has like a unique format, because this one is written in verse, and that is Autobiography of Red by Anne Carson. I feel like this will be another one kind of similar to I Who Have Never Known Men, where it's like a shorter, older book that I think could be a win for me. Okay, so now that I have my contenders, I need to actually narrow it down to 10. And I just need to start making decisions, or else I'm going to be here forever. Okay, I just need to start. I'm going to pick Annie Bot by Sierra Greer for the number 10 spot. This is about an AI girlfriend that, like, the more real and lifelike she becomes, the less well she behaves. And I think it'll just be a really good, fun, dystopian sci-fi with, like, some good commentary as well. Okay, I want to go with one of our, like, cozier things, and I'm going to do Sword Heart by T. Kingfisher. This is about someone, I think her name is Hala, and she is being like held hostage by her in-laws, and then she pulls out a sword to, you know, and inside the sword is Sarkis, and it's like genie in the bottle kind of vibes. He like becomes her protector, and I think it's going to be everything I love about T. Kingfisher. Okay, do I want to put, you know, I want to put Run for the Hills by Kevin Wilson in here, but I don't know if anything is going to live up to Nothing to See Here in my mind, even if it's like a new release from him. I think I'm going to, because I loved Nothing to See Here so much, I don't think it will live up to it for me. So what do I want to put in the number 8 spot? I'm going to go with Water Moon. Yeah, that sounds right. It's a 2025 release, like I said, about a woman who has a pawn shop where you can sell your regrets. And it says she goes on a magical journey. That's honestly all I know about it, but it just, look at the cover, it's just stunning. Okay, so in 2024, the 2 romances that I had were like in spot number like 8 and 7. So I think it's just fitting to put Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez in this spot. So this one is about, I don't even know the characters' names. I just know that both of them have this thing where if they date someone, then the next person that that person meets is like their like true love, or the person that they end up being with permanently. So they decide to date each other and hope thankfully they can cancel that out, and then the next person that they meet will be their person. I've loved Abby Jimenez in the past, and I loved romances with a speculative element, so that has both of those things. Okay, what else do I want to put in here? I'm going to put Every Time I Go on Vacation, Someone Dies by Catherine Mack in my number 6 spot. This is about an author who goes on like a book tour and she's trying to kill off one of her main characters, but that main character is based off of someone that she was involved with like 10 years ago, and then someone is seemingly trying to kill him. So she has to figure out why. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Okay, I've had a few 2024 releases, so now I feel like I should pick something older. So I'm gonna go with Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. This is about Emily Wilde making an Encyclopedia of Fairies, just as the title would suggest. And she is going around documenting this stuff, and she's trying not to fall in love with her academic rival Wendell. And there's footnotes, and I just think it's gonna be something that I love once I finally read it. Another thing that I noticed, especially last year, I kind of bounced back and forth between like something kind of like horror, speculative, and then to something like cozier, lighter. And so I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to pull in one of my like horror adjacent options, and it's going to be The Haunting of Velkwood by Gwendolyn Keist. This is following 3 girls who were teenagers at the time. Something happened to their neighborhood where I think there's like a veil over the neighborhood, and like everyone like turned into ghosts, and no one could leave except for these 3 girls. And now it's 20 years later, and one of them decides that they want to go back in and try to figure out what happened. Okay, I'm going to switch back to cozy and go with A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping by Sangu Mandana, which is like companion book to The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. I honestly have no idea what this one is about, but if it is like the same kind of tone and vibe to The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, then I don't see how I could not love it. The other thing that I noticed with all of these top 10 lists is that I do love like the horror kind of adjacent sadder type of stuff, but it never seems to make it to my number 1 spot. My number 1 spot is usually something that's a little bit more like fun and like lighter. So in the number 2 spot, I'm gonna put We Used to Live Here by Marcus Cleaver. And this is about a couple who live in this house, and then one day a man shows up with his family and says, "We used to live here, I'd like to show my family around, can we come in?" She lets them in, and then weird things start happening. And I'm just so excited to read this book. I think it's gonna be amazing. I think I'm gonna love it because it has like that like mixed media element. I always love that in books, but I don't think it'll be my number 1 favorite, and I'm gonna put The Wedding People by Alison Esbach in my number 1 spot. This might be a risk because I've heard like mixed things about this. This could also be something that I hate. Sometimes I know like I like unlikable characters, but I know sometimes unlikable characters can be like hit or miss. But this one is about a woman who wants to end her life, but she goes to this resort to kind of have like a final like good time vacation, but this resort was booked out for a wedding, so she shouldn't have been able to book. And she meets the bride, and the bride is basically like, "Well, you can't kill yourself at my wedding, you're just gonna have to wait." And then she just kind of becomes like intertwined in the life of this bride, and I think both of them are kind of quite unlikable, but I think it's gonna have just those characters that I love that are like kind of coasting through life, kind of messy, but also just kind of like lets things happen to them, like a passive participant in their own life. And yeah, I think that if this one hits all of like the notes that I love, all of the beats I love, I think it'll be an all-time favorite. Okay, so that is my final list. This took like way too long to think about, and I need to go have a sip of water. I'm excited to look back on this list at the end of the year and see if I got anything correct or if I was way off. Hopefully I actually read all of these books by the end of the year. And yeah, thank you for watching. If you did, be sure to check out my last video where I talk about 25 books that I really want to read in 2025, because I talk about a lot of other good ones that I think could also maybe be potentials for all-time favorites. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.